When my daughter-in-law told me. We got married yesterday. I just stood there, still, quiet, holding my breath like the air itself had stopped moving. I didn't say a word. I didn't cry either. I smiled instead. A strange smile, one that hides a heart slowly breaking inside. It was not anger I felt. It was something heavier, something that doesn't have a name. Maybe disappointment, maybe disbelief, maybe just the feeling of being left behind by your own child. For a moment, I thought she was joking. I even laughed a little and said, "You mean you're engaged, right? You're joking with me again?" But her eyes didn't move. She just looked down, clutching the edge of her dupatta, and repeated softly, "No, Amma, we got married yesterday." The words echoed in my mind like a slow, painful bell. Every syllable hit me in the chest. Yesterday. The boy I raised. The boy whose first step I still remember. The boy who used to run to me after school with his bag still open, his shoes muddy, had gotten married. And I didn't even know. Not a phone call. Not a message. Not a word. Just silence. And then, this. My name doesn't matter much. I'm just a mother. And like many mothers, my life has always revolved around my son, my only child, Ian. When his father passed away 10 years ago, I thought my world had ended too. But Ian, he became my reason to wake up each morning. I told myself, if I can raise him right, then I have done something good in this world. We didn't have much. A small rented house, 2 rooms, and a courtyard where I used to grow some mint and coriander. Life was simple, but peaceful. Ian was a quiet boy, always respectful. When he smiled, the whole room seemed brighter. He used to help me with groceries, cook rice when I was tired, and tell me stories about his college. I still remember how he used to say, "Amma, one day I'll get a good job, and you'll never have to worry again." And I believed him. Because when you're a mother, you don't just love your child, you believe in them like a prayer. A few years passed, and Ian got a small job in the city, nothing big, but enough to manage his rent and send me a little every month. He moved out, saying it would be closer to work. I agreed, even though my heart didn't want him to go. For the first few weeks, he would call me every night. "Amma, did you eat? Amma, don't forget your medicine. Amma, I'll come this weekend." And he did. Every Sunday, he would show up with my favorite bread and some fruits. We would have tea in the courtyard, just the 2 of us. Those were my favorite days. But slowly, things began to change. The calls became less frequent. The Sundays stopped. And my phone stayed silent. At first, I thought he was just busy. Then, I started worrying. One evening, I called him. "Ian Beta, everything okay?" There was a pause on the other end. "Yes, Amma, just a bit tired. Work is too much these days." I could hear something different in his voice. Something distant. I wanted to ask more, but I didn't. I told myself, he's grown up now. Maybe I should not bother him too much. But a mother's heart knows when something is changing. The silence between words. The shorter answers. The missing warmth. He was slipping away, not suddenly, but slowly. Like sand through open fingers. Then, one afternoon, he called after many weeks. "Amma, I'll come tomorrow. I have someone I want you to meet." I still remember how my heart lifted at those words. I cleaned the whole house that night. Cooked his favorite biryani. Pressed his clothes that he had left behind years ago. Even put fresh flowers in the vase. The next day, when I heard the sound of a car outside, I almost ran to the door. There he was, my son. And beside him, a girl I had never seen before. She was polite. Beautiful. Dressed simply. She touched my feet and said softly, "Assalamu alaikum, Amma." I smiled. My heart melted right away. We all sat together. She spoke gently, her eyes lowered. Her name was Sarah. Ian told me they worked at the same office. I could see he liked her. It was clear in the way he looked at her, the way his voice softened when he said her name. After they left that day, I told myself, maybe this is the girl who will bring happiness into his life. I prayed for that. I really did. Days turned into weeks. Sometimes, Ian would bring her along when he came to visit. They would talk, laugh, and sit together in the courtyard. I would make tea and watch from the kitchen window, my heart full of quiet joy. I started to think maybe soon he would tell me they were ready for marriage. I even began collecting ideas, how to decorate, what to cook, what to gift them. Because for a mother, that day, her child's wedding, is not just a celebration. It's a dream. A dream you keep safe for years, wrapped inside your heart like an old piece of silk. Then one day, Ian stopped visiting again. No calls. No messages. Just silence. I waited a week. Then 2. Then 3. When I couldn't hold it anymore, I called him. He didn't pick up. That night, I sat on my bed staring at his childhood photo on the wall, his small hands holding a school trophy, his eyes so full of light. I whispered to it. Why aren't you calling, Beta? There was no answer, just the sound of rain outside. A few more weeks passed before he finally came home. But this time, he came alone. He looked tired. Something heavy sat behind his eyes. I asked gently. Everything okay, Ian? He nodded, avoiding my eyes. Yes, Amma, just too much pressure at work. We ate dinner in silence that night. When he left, I felt a distance between us that no words could cross. Then came that morning. I remember it clearly. I was watering the plants beside me gone cold. Sometimes, silence says more than any words can. A week passed. Then 2. I didn't hear from him again. Sarah didn't come either. No message, no visit. I thought maybe they were busy settling down. But when you are a mother, waiting becomes a habit. You wait for footsteps. You wait for laughter. You wait for the sound of the door opening. But all I heard was the creak of my own chair and the ticking of the clock on the wall. One afternoon, I gathered some courage and decided to visit him myself. I hadn't told him I was coming. I took a small box of sweets and wore my best shawl. On the way, I kept rehearsing what I would say. Beta, I'm so happy for you both. Sarah, how's your new home? Can I help you with anything? I just wanted to see him. To make sure he was okay. To let him know his mother still cared, even if she was not invited to his wedding. When I reached the apartment, my hands started shaking. I rang the bell. Sarah opened the door. Her face showed surprise, and something else. Maybe guilt. Amma. Please come in, she said quickly, stepping aside. I smiled and walked in. The house smelled new of fresh paint, new curtains, the kind of silence that feels temporary. I looked around. It was neat, small, well kept. A family picture was already on the wall, Ian and Sarah smiling together. I stared at it for a few seconds longer than I should have. Ian came out of the bedroom, adjusting his shirt. He stopped when he saw me. Amma, you came, he said, almost as if he didn't expect I ever would. Of course, I replied gently. A mother always visits her children. He smiled, a small nervous smile, and guided me to the sofa. Sarah brought tea and sat quietly beside him. For a while, no one spoke. I asked about his work. He gave short answers. I asked about their plans. He said they were still figuring things out. The silence between us grew like fog. Then I said softly, Beta, I just wanted to say, I'm happy for you both. Truly. Sarah's eyes softened, but But Ian just nodded, looking down. You don't need to feel guilty, I added. I just wish I could have been there, to see my son become a groom. He looked up, guilt clear on his face. I know, Amma. I should have told you. I just didn't know how you'd react. React? I repeated quietly. I'm your mother. What reaction could be bigger than my prayers? He didn't answer. He just looked away. After some time, I got up to leave. Sarah insisted I stay for lunch, but I couldn't. The house was too quiet, and my heart was too loud. Before leaving, I looked at Ian and said, You've made your home, Beta. I'm proud of you. But don't forget, this home, your first one, still waits for you. He nodded. That was all. When I stepped out, I could feel the tears rise in my throat. But I didn't let them fall. I held them back. Because crying wouldn't bring back what was already gone. Back home, I placed the half-eaten box of sweets on the table. I sat beside it and whispered. At least I saw him today. Then I looked at the empty cup beside me, his cup, and wondered if he would ever use it again. Days became weeks, and weeks became months. Sometimes he called, sometimes he didn't. Sometimes I saw them in pictures online, smiling, traveling, laughing. I should have been happy seeing him happy. And I was, in a strange way. But beneath that happiness, something ached quietly. Not jealousy. Not anger. Just distance. The kind of distance that words can't cross anymore. One night, I sat outside under the stars. The air was cool. I closed my eyes and prayed. God, keep my son safe. Keep him happy. Even if he forgets me someday, don't let him forget your blessings. When I opened my eyes, the courtyard looked just as it always had. The same old chair. The same plant pots. The same silence. But it didn't feel like home anymore. Because home is not walls or rooms. It's voices. It's laughter. It's the smell of someone's favorite food cooking in the kitchen. And when those things are gone, you realize the hardest part of being a mother is learning to live in a house that still has your child's memories, but not your child. Months passed. Seasons changed. But inside my heart, nothing moved. Every morning, I woke up early, just as I always did. I made tea for two, out of habit. Then I sat at the table, looking at the second cup grow cold. It was strange how a small empty cup could make a whole house feel lonely. I tried to keep myself busy. I visited the market, talked to neighbors, cooked food I didn't feel like eating. But every face reminded me of my son somehow. Once, I saw a young man helping his mother cross the road. I smiled at them, and then my eyes filled with tears. Because that used to be Ian and me. Once. Sarah called sometimes. Her voice was always polite, respectful. Amma, how are you? Do you need anything? I always said the same thing. I'm fine, Beta. Even when I wasn't. She invited me over a few times. But I always said, next week, inshallah. Next week never came. Then one day, I fell ill. It wasn't serious, just weakness, fever, and loneliness mixing together. The kind of sickness that doesn't always show in blood tests. The neighbor's daughter took me to the clinic. The doctor gave me some medicines and said I should rest. I came home, sat on the bed, and stared at my phone. I wanted to call Ian. But I didn't. Because when a mother calls her son too often, she begins to feel like a burden. And I didn't want to be that. 2 days later, Sarah came to see me. She looked worried. Amma, you should have told us you were sick, she said, helping me sit up. I smiled faintly. I didn't want to disturb you both. She stayed for a while, made tea, and cleaned the kitchen. She talked softly, trying to fill the silence with kindness. Before leaving, she said, Ian couldn't come, he had a meeting. But he'll visit soon. I nodded and said, it's okay, Beta. Tell him I'm fine. But when she left, I sat by the window and cried for the first time in months. Because I realized something. When your child stops needing you, your heart still doesn't stop needing them. A few weeks later, a wedding invitation came to our neighborhood. The sound of drums, laughter, and lights filled the air. I stood near my gate and watched the guests walk in, dressed beautifully, happy. It reminded me of all the dreams I had once kept for Ian's wedding, the food, the decorations, the laughter that never came to my house. That night, I sat on the floor and opened an old box from the cupboard. Inside were small things. Ian's childhood drawings. His report cards. An old birthday card that said, "To the best Amma in the world." I touched that card like it was made of glass. And that's when I broke again. Sometimes, breaking doesn't happen in one moment. It happens slowly, piece by piece, day by day, until one day, you can't hold yourself together anymore. That night, I whispered to God, if this is how life must be, then give me strength to live it. But please, just let me see my son smile in front of me one more time. I fell asleep with tears still wet on my cheeks. A few weeks later, Ian called. Amma, can you come to our house tomorrow? We want to talk. His tone was calm, almost formal. Something inside me trembled. I said yes. The next day, I took the bus, holding a small bag with some sweets and fruit. The road felt longer than usual. Every turn reminded me of something from his childhood, the shop where he bought candies, the corner where he learned to ride his bicycle. When I reached their home, I noticed something different. The door was slightly open. I stepped in quietly. Sarah was sitting on the sofa, her eyes red as if she'd been crying. Ian stood by the window, looking out. Amma, he said softly. Please sit. I sat down, clutching my bag tightly. Sarah looked at him, then at me. Amma, there's something we need to tell you. My heart sank. We're moving abroad, Ian said finally. It's a job opportunity, a good one. I've been selected for a long-term project. We might not come back soon. I stared at him, trying to understand his words. Abroad? I repeated. For how long? Maybe 2 years, he said, not meeting my eyes. Maybe more. Sarah spoke gently. We'll call often, Amma. We'll visit when we can. I nodded slowly. Of course, I said, forcing a smile. You should go. It's your life. But my chest felt hollow. Ian sat beside me and held my hand for the first time in months. Amma, please don't be sad. It's for our future. I'll send money, I'll call. I interrupted softly. Beta, I don't need money. I just need time. Your time. He looked away again. The next few minutes passed quietly. I gave them my blessings, kissed Sarah's forehead, and said all the right words a mother is supposed to say. But inside, I felt like something was being torn away from me. When I left, the sun was setting. The street looked blurry because of my tears. I held my shawl tightly around my shoulders, whispering to myself. This is what life does, it gives you everything, then takes it back quietly. The day of their departure came soon after. I went to the airport with them. Sarah hugged me tightly. We'll video call, Amma. Every week, okay? I smiled and nodded. Ian hugged me too, a short, tight hug, then turned to leave. As they walked toward the gate, I called out softly. Ian. He turned. I raised my hand and said, take care of her. That's all I ask. He nodded. Then he disappeared into the crowd. I stood there until the last sound of their footsteps faded. That was the real goodbye. Not the wedding I missed. Not the silence between our calls. It was that airport moment, the quiet walk away, that ended something inside me. Days turned into months again. At first, they called often. Video calls, short chats, photos. They seemed happy, busy, building their new life. I tried to be happy for them. I really did. But slowly, even the calls stopped. Once a week turned into once a month. Then, once every few months. Each time my phone rang, I hoped it was them. But it was never them. The turning point wasn't just that they left the country. It was that, somewhere along the way, they left me too. Not out of hate. Not even out of neglect. Just out of life moving on. People say time heals. But I've learned something else. Time doesn't always heal. Sometimes, it just teaches you how to live with the pain quietly. One night, I sat in the courtyard again, looking at the stars. I whispered to the sky. Do mothers ever stop waiting? Do hearts ever stop missing? No answer came, just the soft wind moving the leaves. But deep inside, I already knew the answer. No, they don't. After that day, everything inside me broke. I stopped calling him. I stopped sending messages. At first, I used to sit with my phone in my hand, waiting for his name to appear on the screen. But days passed, and then weeks. No message came. No call. Not even a short one, asking how I was. The world around me became quiet. I had never realized before how loud silence could be. Every sound reminded me of him, the clinking of cups, the creak of the gate, the ticking of the clock. He used to say, "Ma, I'll always take care of you." Now, even the wind sounded like a lie. I began to live like a shadow. People in the neighborhood started asking why he didn't visit anymore. I smiled, pretending everything was fine. But at night, when the lights went off, I talked to the walls like they were my friends. I would whisper, he must be busy. Maybe tomorrow. But tomorrow never came. One day, I took out his childhood photo album. Each page felt like a wound opening again. Him in his school uniform, holding a small lunchbox. His first bicycle. The day he won a medal and ran to show me, shouting, "Ma. Look, I did it." And I remembered how I hugged him that day, telling him I was proud. Now, he was far away, in another world, with another life, and I wasn't part of it anymore. I tried to write him a letter once. I sat by the window, pen trembling in my hand. I wrote, "My dear son, I hope you're doing well. I just wanted to hear your voice once." Then I stopped. I realized that letter would never be sent. He wouldn't read it. And even if he did, he might think it was just another reminder of guilt. So, I tore it apart and watched the pieces fall like snow on the floor. Months later, I fell sick. Not too badly at first, just coughing, a little fever. But my body felt weaker each day. The doctor said, "You need rest and company." I nodded and said, "I'll manage." Because who did I have to call? One night, the fever rose high. I remember lying on the bed, sweating, and whispering his name, just his name. Ali. Maybe my voice reached the ceiling. Maybe it disappeared in the wind. But he didn't come. No one did. When I opened my eyes in the morning, sunlight was pouring through the curtains, and I was still alone. That was the moment I understood something. You can give your whole heart to someone, raise them, protect them, love them with everything you have. And still, one day, you can become a stranger in their world. I didn't curse him. No. A mother's heart doesn't know how to hate her child. But I stopped waiting. Waiting hurts more than loneliness. A year passed. The world moved on. Seasons changed. Sometimes, I saw young men walking with their mothers in the park and felt my heart ache. Not from jealousy, from longing. That small, simple wish to walk beside your child, to hear him say, "Ma, let's get ice cream." Such a small thing. But for me, it had become a dream too far. One evening, while watering the plants, a neighbor came running to my gate. She said, "Did you hear? Your son and his wife had a baby." I froze. A baby? My grandchild? I smiled weakly and said, "Oh, that's good news." She continued, "They posted pictures online, you should see how happy they look." I nodded. But when she left, I sat on the bench outside and whispered to myself, he didn't even call to tell me. Even in that moment of joy, he didn't think of me. That hurt more than anything. I imagined that baby, so small, wrapped in a blanket, with the same eyes as his father. I thought, maybe one day, when that child grows up, he'll ask, "Where's Grandma?" And maybe my son will pause before answering. Because what will he say? That he never called her again? That he left her behind with only silence and memories? As the months passed, I learned to live with the emptiness. It became part of me, like a scar you stop noticing after a while. I would still cook sometimes, his favorite dishes, out of habit. And then I'd remember there was no one to serve them to. So, I'd give the food to the neighbor's children, smiling as if it didn't hurt. People said, time heals everything. But no, time doesn't heal. It just teaches you how to hide your pain better. How to smile when your heart is breaking quietly. Sometimes, at night, I heard laughter from the street, families sitting together, sharing dinner, talking. And I'd whisper, I hope he's happy. Because even if he forgot me, I couldn't forget him. One afternoon, when the sky was cloudy and the air smelled like rain, I saw him again, after almost 2 years. I was standing by the gate, and a car stopped outside. He stepped out, wearing a crisp white shirt. For a moment, my heart stopped. He looked older, stronger, but tired, maybe from life, maybe from guilt. I didn't know what to do. My hands trembled. I wanted to run to him, to hug him. But I stayed still. He walked toward me slowly, eyes avoiding mine. "Ma," he said softly, "I came to see you." I smiled. It was the kind of smile that hides too much pain. "I didn't think you'd remember this house," I replied. He looked down. I should have called. "I'm sorry." His voice cracked. But I didn't say anything. I just nodded. Silence filled the air between us as thick, heavy, filled with all the words we never said. He stayed for only 10 minutes. 10 minutes after 2 years. He told me about his job, his baby, his wife. He said, "We're doing well, Ma." I said, "That's good." And that was it. When he left, I watched the car disappear down the road. I stood there until the sound of the engine faded. And then I whispered to the wind, "You came back too late, my son. But I still love you." That night, I cried again, but this time, the tears were quiet. Not angry tears. Not hopeful ones either. Just tears that came from a place too deep to explain. It's strange, how love never dies, even when everything else does. I told myself, maybe this is what motherhood is, to love without reason, to forgive without being asked. But forgiveness doesn't erase pain. It just allows you to live with it. Soft pause, sound of gentle rain outside. Sometimes, I dream of him as a little boy again, running toward me, laughing, calling Ma. And I wake up smiling. For a second, I forget everything. Then I open my eyes and see the empty room. And the silence returns. That's when I realize, love isn't always about being together. Sometimes, love is just letting go. Even if it breaks you a little more each day. After that short visit, life went back to its quiet rhythm. The house felt the same again, still, silent, and waiting for footsteps that would never come. But something inside me had changed. It was like my heart finally understood what my mind had known all along. Some distances never close, no matter how many tears you shed. Every morning, I would sweep the small porch outside, just as I used to when he lived here. The habit was hard to let go of. Sometimes, I caught myself glancing at the road, expecting to see him walking toward me, like before, carrying a bag of groceries, smiling shyly, saying, "Ma, I brought your favorite sweets." But of course, that never happened again. The garden I once cared for had started to dry up. The flowers didn't bloom like they used to. Maybe they missed his laughter too. I often sat beside the old rose plant and whispered to it, "You've seen it all, haven't you? You've seen my happiness and my silence." Sometimes I even smiled at my own words. Talking to plants became easier than talking to people. Neighbors would stop by occasionally, kind souls, bringing soup or fruit. They'd ask, "How's your son doing?" I'd reply, "He's doing well, mashallah. Busy with work and family." And they'd nod, smiling. They didn't need to know that the last time I heard his voice was months ago. Some truths are better kept quiet. They hurt less that way. One evening, I was sitting by the window when it began to rain. Soft drops touched the glass, and the sound echoed through the house. Rain always made me remember him. He used to love standing in the rain when he was little, his arms wide open, laughing, shouting, "Ma, come outside." I'd scold him, "You'll catch a cold." He'd run inside dripping wet, hugging me tight, his tiny hands cold but his heart warm. That memory hit me like a wave that night. I closed my eyes and whispered, "If I could go back in time, I'd let you dance in the rain as long as you wanted." As the rain poured, I realized how many moments I had saved for later. I thought there would always be another day to talk, another morning to share tea, another evening to sit together. But life doesn't always wait for us. Sometimes, later never comes. The next few weeks, I found peace in small things. The morning light through the curtains. The call of the birds. The warmth of the blanket I knitted myself. They became my companions. I stopped expecting anything from anyone. Not because I stopped loving, but because love had taught me that expecting only brings more pain. There's a strange freedom in acceptance. When you stop asking why, and start whispering it's okay. That's when the heart becomes quiet. Not happy, but quiet. Sometimes, I'd look at the old clock on the wall. It had stopped ticking a long time ago. I thought of fixing it once, but then I didn't. Maybe I liked it that way, frozen in time, just like my memories. Months passed, and I started keeping a small diary. Not for him, not for anyone else, just for me. Each night, I wrote a few lines before bed. Little thoughts, small memories, gentle prayers. One page said, "Dear God, if he's happy, then that's enough for me. Even if I never see him again." Another said, "A mother's love doesn't end. It just learns to live quietly in the corners of her heart." And another, written after many tears. I wish he had known that the word Ma isn't just a name, it's a home. One winter morning, the cold was sharp. I sat near the heater with a shawl around my shoulders, holding a cup of tea. As the steam rose, I thought of my life, how much of it had been spent waiting for footsteps, phone calls, or letters. Then I smiled softly and said to myself, maybe that's what being a mother is, waiting, even when there's no promise. I remembered all the times I had forgiven him silently. The times he didn't call. The times he forgot my birthday. The times I cried alone. And yet, I still loved him with the same warmth. Because that's what love does, it doesn't measure, it doesn't demand, it just exists. That year, my health grew weaker. The doctors said I needed rest, but I had already spent years resting from the world, from pain, from expectations. Some nights, I felt my breath getting slower, my chest heavier. And I thought, if I don't wake up tomorrow, I hope he remembers me not as the woman he left, but as the mother who loved him quietly, every single day. I didn't want revenge. I didn't want apologies. I just wanted to be remembered, not by the world, but by the one heart I raised. Then, one afternoon, the doorbell rang. It startled me, visitors were rare. When I opened the door, a young boy stood there holding a small envelope. "Delivery for Mrs. Rahim," he said. I nodded and took it. Inside was a letter from him. My hands trembled as I opened it. The handwriting was the same, familiar, messy, full of emotion. It said, "Ma, I don't know if you'll ever forgive me. Life got busy, and I forgot what really matters. I thought you'd always be there, waiting. I realize now that time doesn't wait for anyone. I just wanted to say, I love you. And I'm sorry it took me so long to say it." Tears rolled down my face, dropping onto the paper. I held the letter close to my chest. For the first time in years, I felt warmth inside, not happiness, just warmth. Because even though it was too late, he still remembered. I whispered, "It's okay, my son. It's okay." That night, I slept peacefully for the first time in years. In my dream, he was little again, running through the yard, calling my name. I saw him turn, laughing, holding my hand. The sun was shining. There was no pain, no distance, no silence, just love, pure and simple. When I woke up, the morning light was soft. The letter was still beside me. And for the first time, I didn't feel alone. I closed my eyes again and whispered. Some stories don't end with reunion, they end with remembrance. If someone asked me now what I learned from my life, I'd say this. Love doesn't always return the way you expect. Sometimes, it fades quietly into distance. Sometimes, it comes back too late. And sometimes, it never comes back at all. But love, true love, still lives inside you. Even when the people you love forget, your heart remembers. And that memory, that quiet, invisible bond? It's both your greatest blessing and your deepest pain. Because a mother never stops loving. Even when she's forgotten. Even when her house is silent. Even when she's gone. When my daughter-in-law told me they had already married, I smiled instead of crying. Because sometimes, tears are not the only sign of heartbreak. Sometimes, silence is louder. And though my story ended with distance, it began, and will always begin, with love.